Welcome to the Indomitable podcast. I'm your host, Di Cerullo, and today we have another great episode that will leave you inspired. My guest today is the Indomitable Dr. Kristen Donnelly. Dr. Kristen is an award-winning 4-time TEDx speaker, international empathy educator, author, and researcher with 2 decades of experience in helping people understand the beauty in difference and the power in inclusivity. She's one of the good doctors of Abbey Research, COO of their parent company, co-founder of the Community Research Institute, and unapologetic nerd for stories of change. I love that. Dr. Kristen is a regular contributor to Forbes, Medium, and Thrive Global, and is also the co-author of the best-selling book, The Culture of Burnout, Why Your Exhaustion is Not Your Fault. Well, hello, Dr. Kristen. I am so grateful to have you here today.
Oh my gosh, I'm honored to be asked, Dee. Thank you so much.
Yes. Before we get too far down the road here, tell us anything that I have left out here about yourself.
I grew up and now live outside of Philadelphia with my husband, which is a absolutely massive part of my identity. I have a master's of social work and have done a lot of work in adolescent psychology. My doctorate is in sociology. So basically all of my academic training is in how do people know themselves and then interact with other people in terms of making up this culture and society that we have.
That is so awesome. So one of your expertises here is burnout, obviously, if you wrote a whole book about it here, or co-authored an entire book. I don't want to misspeak here. Tell us a little bit about what burnout is.
So basically, burnout is the perpetual state of not being able to finish the stress cycle. That's it. What that looks like in every single person is different. There's some common themes, most of which, you can find on Google. Apathy, just feeling like getting out of bed is the worst idea you've ever had, not feeling engaged in any relationship that you have, disconnection from your own self at times, all of those things. But fundamentally what it is that you've been in stress cycles for so long and they've compounded for so long that your emotional capacity to handle any stress is a sliver of what it should be. You can't prevent stress. Stress is part of life and our body has a whole system to deal with it because of that. So like a normal stress, like dropping your keys in a snowbank, with folks who are not in burnout, that's like an inconvenience to like an annoyance, Folks who are in burnout, that could be the worst thing that happened all day and they could go immediately back to bed and have some level of a breakdown. And those of us who are on the outside might look at them and say, it's keys in a snowbank. You're going to be okay. And that is true and false at the same time. And so that's what burnout is. The lovely thing is that there's a lot of ways out of it. The negative thing is that the longer you stay there, the more physio responses your body has to living in that much stress for that long. And everyone's body is different. Everyone's brain is different. Everyone's life is different. Different people are different is like the summary of my entire professional career. But one of the kind of true isms of burnout is that you don't get out of it accidentally. You get into it accidentally, but you don't get out of it accidentally.
Right. Is it something that you can avoid, or is it something that you regularly find yourselves in?
I absolutely believe you can avoid it intentionally. So one of the main contention of the book that I co-wrote with my best friend and business partner, Erin. So when I say we, I'm not like in line for the throne of England or anything. Like it really is. It really is the two of us. Our contention is that America particularly as a society actually preconditions all of us for burnout. Because the American dream is not possible without burnout. American society celebrates burnout. And we have also attached moral value to hard work. And so the minute any of us stop working, we immediately feel lazy. And then we work harder because we don't want to feel lazy because we've been told laziness means we're bad. This is especially true for women and particularly true for millennials just because of where we kind of fall in the live, laugh, love cycle of Pinterest inspiration. And kind of and the overachiever society that we were brought up into. Gen Z is experiencing massive burnout. Gen X does, boomers do, all of that. Every generation has its own kind of flavor. And as an elder millennial, it is what we've looked at a little bit more. all that to be said, creating a life that does not include burnout is countercultural.
Right.
However, all of us are capable of being countercultural.
Right. Right.
So just like getting out of burnout requires intention, preventing burnout requires intention, because all of your life, your cultural programming, your societal place, the way everything works, every system you are a part of is shoving you towards burnout.
Right. Right.
And so you can stem the tide, but it takes concerted and conscious effort.
Yes, agree. I am part of the neurodivergent community, and our conversations lately have been very much centered around burnout and autistic burnout and how cyclical that is because of how our brains work. You say that burnout is cultural and it is a cultural value. How do you think that that is impacting us as neurodivergent people?
My gracious. Asking the super easy questions this
I
morning,
know. Right off the bat.
Right off the bat. So first of all, I'll keep hammering on the different brains are different. And one of the beautiful things about living in the time we live in right now, that we understand brains just a little bit more than we ever have before. And so neurodivergent, we now understand is such a broad umbrella. We understand that, that there's a lot more people under that umbrella than we ever thought before. For instance, I have bipolar 1, and that is under that umbrella, which, 20 years ago wouldn't have been. So that means we have more data on brains, but the more data we have, the more data we realize we need. Why I think that the way we talk about burnout, being Erin and I, and the framework that we've put forward for prevention, mitigation, and recovery works really well for neurodivergent brains is because it's all dependent on what works for you.
Right.
There isn't like this list of you have to go to SoulCycle, burn this candle, do this meditation retreat, or you'll never be unburned out.
Right.
It's instead, here is the 4 categories of things we, from science and research and our own lives and everything else, these 4 categories of things we believe you need to cultivate practices in.
Yes.
We do not care what that looks like. You first do no harm and then do you. If it does not hurt you or another person and it serves you, rock the heck on. I don't care.
Right.
So our 4 kind of sections are physical rest, rejuvenation, which means joy.
Yes.
The third one is realignment, which is remembering kind of your place in the universe. And the 4th is reconnection, which is people and community and understanding.
Yes.
So like I'm an extrovert and a pretty raging one. And so my reconnection involves a lot of people a lot of the time.
Right.
Erin is an introvert who gets overstimulated very, very quickly. So her reconnection looks very different than mine.
Right.
Rejuvenation being joy. I love things differently than other people do. The older I get, the less apologetic I am about things I love.
Right?
Like,
oh my God, yes.
I love Taylor Swift and Broadway and Disney and baseball, and I am an onion. I contain multitudes.
I also love Disney. And all of those things. And I am in my Golden Girls era. So
love it. I love the Golden Girls era. So yeah, and then realignment is just, I think is incredibly important for neurodivergent folks, actually, just speaking from an impersonal perspective, because for me anyway, my brain always tells me that I am insignificant.
Right.
Or that I am a problem.
Right.
That I am too much. There's other people that's not true. But for me, that's what it tells me. And what realignment does is remind me that I am not insignificant.
Right.
That I have a purpose and a place and a being. I'm not imperative. I'm allowed to take naps. So it recalibrates me to being like the right amount of egotistical. Like it recalibrates to like how I'm actually seen and move through the world. And then rest is like annoying for a lot of our brains, but like it's true, like we need to sleep. So those are our 4 kind of categories, and however you cultivate those practices is up to you, and it's going to change and evolve, and what works on a Wednesday might not work on a Saturday, and you just kind of make it work. And so because of that elasticity, I do think this works pretty well for neurodivergent brains.
That is amazing. Regularly, I'm having this conversation with people about how are you dealing with this? I'm dealing with skill regression. How do we get out of this? A lot of us who ended up being able to survive and get places in life did so very against culture. There's a reason why so many of us are finding ourselves in adulthood, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that a conversation that I continue to have is the idea that we can get ourselves out of this by trying harder, just working hard. You know what I mean? Especially as a woman, especially as a mom, all I ever hear is that I should be working harder and doing more and trying harder. And even when I'm resting, I am still checking my phone to make sure I'm not missing anything, because how can I possibly rest and not feel guilt? Is that a cycle that you go through as well, or is that something that's common for y'all to see as experts?
We see it everywhere, all the time,
Right?
everywhere. We've got data that burnout happens everywhere. America's
Right.
in like the top 5 of
Of
countries
course.
that report burnout, but we're not the
Right.
top. That's Japan. It just looks different everywhere.
Oh,
So like burnout in Japan is driven by a lot more, according to data, the honor shame culture.
right.
Burnout in America is driven more by the individual morality that we have decided. We're not allowed to ask for help. So where all of this work morality came from is like super foundational to America, like 1600s kind of
Right.
super foundational, where the first group of white folks that came over and colonized and committed genocide and then stayed were
Right.
the Puritans.
Right.
They're different from the Pilgrims. Same
Mhm.
funny hats, same shoe buckles, different
Mhm.
people. And the Puritans' whole thing was to establish their kind of a community revolving around their faith system.
Right.
And there are 3 elements of their faith system that still, like, when I say them, you will be surprised that we still believe them all today. So one of them is that you are only a good person if you work really hard. You literally cannot be a good person if you're not a hard worker. The second is that you can only be a hard worker if you do it all by yourself. And the third is that sleep is for when you are dead. That's it. So those things line up really well with financial success and resource accumulation. So by the time all of the other, immigrant groups that would come and have some level of power or have some level of agency come over, they would look at who was already here living by those tenets and say, I want that. So the American dream demands those 3 things. And those 3 things feed American burnout. Those are the foundations of American burnout. So I lived in the UK for 5-ish years, in Northern Ireland on and off, and my husband is Northern Irish. And so we have these conversations a lot about hard work and boundaries and all these kind of other things. He just doesn't maintain this, I'm not a good person if I'm not a hard worker. It's important to him to work hard to provide for me. In his mind, that's a whole other like gendered thing we can get to. But it's important for him for his sense of pride and his sense of like self-worth. But this narrative that I have, that if I am not of service, if I'm not a hard worker, I am an abject moral failure, is not a narrative he has. So there are people in every country that possess that.
Right.
Degrees of it, but not anywhere else that we can find quite has the way we talk about it. So it's things like this is a root cause as to why we don't have a federal paternal leave policy.
Right.
We don't have healthcare because it like if you're not a hard worker and therefore don't have a job and you're therefore not a good person and therefore we shouldn't be providing your healthcare.
Right. Right.
So it's like the foundation. So if like you've ever had a knee-jerk reaction to hearing that someone is on government assistance and you're like, oh, that person's lazy. You've ever thought that in your entire life. Congratulations, you're American.
Right.
It's just how we're programmed. But yeah, that shame cycle is massive. Like we're all in it. I mean, it is gendered, like women get it differently than men. But no, super normal. It's super common. Normal is just a setting on a tumble dryer. So it's super, super common as a human experience.
That is sad to hear. For not even just because it's common, but because it's not real, right? Because the people who are the highest up in terms of wealth are not people who have made it there themselves. In fact, they are usually people who are being supported by entire networks of people that are making these things work. And yet somehow we have allowed that to filter down in such a way amongst ourselves, the common folk, that must be right. And I'm not sure how they're getting away with that. And I'm so fascinated. Do you know what I mean? But I'm fascinated by the fact that like we are buying this wholesale and not ever questioning, how did we get here? How do we expect to be able to obtain the same level of quote unquote success without the same exact supports. And further, I hear, and I don't want to say anybody specific because God, the comments, there are certain individuals that very much think of themselves as self-made men.
Oh,
And
yeah, I can start naming them alphabetically if you'd like.
Alphabetically, yeah. Right? And that's so fascinating to me because those people are the first ones to believe that they have made it to where they are through nothing but hard work and dedication rather than being born on third base. How do those two things fit together in your mind? Because like those are the two pieces that aren't linking up. I agree that you are absolutely right that those are the foundations of American culture, especially individualism, especially the Catholic guilt, especially all of that. But how are those two things living side by side with the wealthy must be morally higher up than we are? How does that work for people in their minds?
I mean, internalized capitalism is a hell of a drug. Like,
right?
it's just like,
how is this working together?
So first of all, I will say that we're in late stage capitalism.
Right.
It's crumbling, collapsing. It's going to have to reform. There's lots of fascinating conversations, academically fascinating, realistically terrifying conversations to have about being alive during an era of social change.
Right.
But one of the kind of side effects of this right now is that the things that in generations past might have placated a lot of us to not examine things are collapsing.
Right.
In the past, there are men who did not inherit wealth who became self-made men, using these air quotes.
Right.
And so they are not Elon Musk, who inherited a bunch of stuff, or Donald Trump, who inherited a bunch of stuff. They are John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, who were immigrants and came over. Correct. And so they could do the narrative easier because part of being self-made is exploiting other people.
Right.
Like, that's a feature, not a bug. Right. So, like, in order to be self-made, you're going to have to step on people. And that was accepted as not even like a sad consequence. That was accepted as like part of what you do.
Right.
So then you fast forward a generation and a half, let's say.
Right.
And we're in the 70s, 80s, so where boomers are in Wall Street or whatnot. And you get, again, the narrative, a huge pocket of self-made men in particular. Right. A lot of whom made their wealth on Wall Street and in the boom of Wall Street. And there's no examination whatsoever that means they made their money on the back of other people's financial detriment.
Right.
Because honestly, I'll be really, like, the human brain can only handle so much self-shame.
Right.
Like, you can justify a lot. So, like, I know somebody who built, largely on his own, a multinational, multi-million-dollar business from very little. Like, he took an existing one that was worth about $100,000, and within about 10 years, it was worth $10 million.
Sure.
He did it without abusing people, to the best of his knowledge. He did it as ethically as he could.
Right.
And so to this day, he will look right at you and say, I am a self-made man. I did it all on my own. To which I say, did you build the road you drove on?
Right. Right.
Who collected your trash?
Right.
No, you're not. You're not.
Right. We're part of the community. Right.
But all of the systems that are set up, especially for middle class, middle-aged, middle income, able-bodied, neurotypical white men, is designed to make them never see their privilege, and designed to make the rest of us accept their privilege as unassailable.
Right.
These are not bugs in the system.
Right.
The system is designed so that we never see the system.
Right. Right.
And so that's basically the answer. Like, one of the things that we go on a little bit about in the book is the cowboy myth, the fetishization of cowboys in the United States imagination. And Aaron discovered this fascinating article that we talk about all the time about how the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" originated as a way to express an impossibility.
Right.
Because you physically cannot do it.
Right.
But then we took that and we married it with, in the 1940s and 50s especially, the fetishization of cowboys.
Right.
And turned it into a thing everyone should be able to do. But, like, pause for a flippin' second.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally impossible. You can't do it. You fall on your butt.
Right.
We are programmed from the moment we are born to accept that this is the way things are supposed to be. It takes either a very specific brain chemistry, a specific life event, or a combination of all the same things to have a thing in a certain way, the veil lifted and go, oh, it doesn't have to work this way.
Right. Right. So it feels like we are in that place now, societally, that we are getting to that place now. We are seeing a lot of social change happening all at once, right? Yep. I read an article recently that was talking about how millennials, yourself, myself, are getting to the highest levels of management and recognizing that we don't want to be here, right? Like getting to this place and being like, oh God, no, I don't want this at all. And that is that's interesting to me, first of all, because of course it is. Of course it is, people. And then I recently read an article in The Guardian that was just talking about how millennials are opting out, and we're like, nope, soft life. We're not doing this anymore. We're not part of it. And just, why do you think that's happening? How is this happening on such a large scale? Or is it? Is it the media that's talking about this, or is it actually happening on such a huge scale?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Our research shows that that's the tapping out of leadership is not happening as much as MSNBC is pearl clutching over.
Of course.
What I think we are doing in larger numbers is changing what leadership looks like.
I agree with that.
Every time there's like a real shift in an organization, Erin and I look at each other, we're like, oh, a millennial's in charge.
Yes.
So it's more that I think that we are shifting what a CEO behaves like, shifting what a COO behaves like. And so people are not tapping out and then leaving the workforce. They're rising to those positions and going, okay, how do I shift this position? What changes do I want to make? That's what I'm seeing more. Yeah. There's definitely the folks that are rising and are like, oh, I don't want this. But that's been the case in every generation.
Of course.
Like that's constant. Like you get somewhere and you're like, oh, nope, peace out.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, a huge thing for millennials will always be that we know we will die in debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that our parents cannot wrap their brain around that by and large.
Right.
So they think often when I talk to people, I talk to my own parents, I talk to my friends' parents, and we look at the data, boomers believe that debt is optional. And so debt is something we entered into willingly, and therefore moral hard work. We are bad and lazy if we are not out of debt. And connecting the dots to, y'all told us that a student loan was a mortgage.
Right.
Y'all told us this was good debt. And you told us we would pay it off and it would be forgiven. And oh, by the way, don't you remember that when we were 17, they were shoving credit card applications into our college mailboxes? And no one stopped us and told us what that meant. Like, there's a pocket of about 10 years of American history where we were young people were encouraged to be incredibly financially reckless. And we have collectively as a people forgotten that existed and are now just blaming everybody for those consequences. So that's a huge thing, is I'm going to die in debt. I'm going to die in debt. Amazing. Fantastic. Citibank is going to end up taking back my house. Like who at a certain level, like you can't handle that much stress. So you just go like, F it. Right. I am going to buy an annual pass to Disney. I am going to go to Broadway as often as possible. I am going to travel around the world to watch my favorite sports team because I could die tomorrow or I could die in 80 years and it doesn't matter. I'm still in debt.
Right.
So there's that emotion that is very true. Also, the developmental ages that millennials particularly were when big things happened is significant. The oldest of us were sophomores or juniors in high school when Columbine happened. And the youngest of us were in elementary school. Right. So you have Columbine, a significant event within our kind of cognitive lifetime. Then you have the turn of the millennium, 9/11, the war in Iraq, the 2008 recession. Yep. Trump's election for a lot of people, COVID, Brexit internationally, like all of these major things that constantly told us that the world is falling apart at the seams.
Right.
And we haven't even touched climate change, which is a much more present reality for Gen Z than it is for millennials, but it's still like we were taught we had to recycle or the planet would die.
Right. Like, remember Captain Planet, y'all? Like,
oh my God, Captain Planet. Like, we were taught the planet would die if we did not recycle and we did not cut up the
yes.
Yep.
I still do that. I will pull them apart. Yes, exactly. Completely.
So a lot of pressure was put on us from a very young age.
Yes.
I saw a quote the other day, and I'm misquoting this, but it's the same thing. It's like, you prepared us to live a dream that then between when we were young and when we were old, you destroyed the world where that dream is possible.
Right. Yes.
So I think a lot of it's that Gen Z is growing up in the destroyed world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're watching us reckon with what this all looks like. They
Right.
have their own bucket of trauma and their
Of
own
course.
stuff. God love them. But
Mm-hmm.
I think in particular, millennials are opting out of some traditional stuff
Yes.
because they're realizing it doesn't have to be traditional.
Right. Right. Agreed. I'm seeing like the great divorce. Marriage becomes sort of more optional for people. And I am like rooting for that for everybody back. So you remember how they were talking about how lazy and entitled we were not like 5-10 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
We're having that exact same conversation about Gen Z again. Lazy and entitled, right?
Yeah.
It gets me thinking, is any of it real? Like, it was the avocado toast with us. It's the iPads for my kids. I think I read an article in like the LA Times or something a couple of days ago where they were complaining that Gen Alpha is just lazy, entitled, illiterate, and feral. And I was just sitting there reading. I'm like, guys, why are we doing this?
We do it because the only way that you can make money in media anymore is making us afraid of things. So
right?
like that's why they do it. So here's the deal. There's articles in newspapers from 1910 onwards saying that no one wants to work anymore.
No one wants to work anymore.
Like this is a thing.
Annually from like 1900 all the way up.
All the way up. It's what I tell our interns all the time is like everything they're saying about you, they said about us.
They said about us.
And the only reason, and then they said it about Gen X. And the only reason they didn't say it about boomers was because like no one was saying those kind of things. But then if you like watch the musical Music Man, we were blaming youth in 1890s for things like we just used to have child labor and now we have child labor laws. And so it looks different. Anyway, there are legitimate things that are different about every generation. The cultural gap between millennials and Gen X is the largest gap during recorded generational studies because of Gen Z's digital native life.
Technology.
Millennials are the last generation that ever experienced an analog childhood. So my reaction to the LA Times, you know, if I was on a talk show and somebody handed me that article, I said, okay, so if they are, why? Is it possibly because a lot of them had school interrupted for 2 years in a global pandemic?
Right.
Is it possible that it's because you expected their parents who are not qualified educators to be their educators? Is it possible that children can pick up on stress of their parents and everyone is emotionally falling apart right now? Is it possible that you have taken away third spaces where kids are allowed to be kids without paying for it? Is it possible all of the, like, these are all the explanations behind it. Do I think that Gen Z is traumatized? Absolutely. We have taken away every single safe space they could possibly have. You can get shot anywhere in America.
Anywhere in America. Yep.
Anywhere in America. And then constantly, every single time reform comes up, they watch their politicians not give shit.
Yep, I agree.
So how are they not walking buckets of trauma?
Of course.
God love them. Additionally, we did hand them all of these anger machines and told them to carry them around in their pockets. And for safety, they need to. For emotions, they shouldn't. And so we know that Instagram destroys the self-concept of teenage girls. Mark Zuckerberg admitted it sitting on a panel for Congress. He knows what he was doing. But he made money off of it, so he doesn't care.
Right.
And we know all this, which sidebar, by the way, all of the people on the internet that are like, man, if I had this much money, I'd give it all away, blah, 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 blah. You wanting to give all your money away is why you will never have that much money.
That's exactly what I say to people. Oh my God, you're like in my brain today. You know what, y'all, think about it right now. If I were to give you however much money this would be, right? What would you do with it? Would you do what they have done and find ways to buy up all of Hawaii and all of the little dirty deeds that they're doing? Or would you find a way to plug it into your community, pay for your schools, fund your community? Of course you would. That is how you know that it is not a moral failing of yours that you are not billionaires. Like, obviously. Okay.
It's so funny. The parent company, the one my brother and I run, one of the one of the products we make is stains that diagnose cancer.
That's awesome.
Obviously, very important product, not only to us, but to the world. And whenever my brother or I are in business meetings, and we talk about like, well, we want to grow our business because we want to make sure we can continue to provide for our employees.
Yes.
All of them will immediately go to that product and tell us to start charging 700, 800, 900 times what we already do. And we just kind of look at them and we say, no, we're not. Like, that's off the table. Yes. Because all the pharma companies are going to do is pass that on. They're going to pass that price on.
Yes.
And so if I do a 900% up, up margin, they're going to do a 1900% up margin. Right. And all of a sudden, this thing that could grind the global diagnostic market to a halt is being held up because we're in a bidding war.
Right.
And so like, that is how I know my brother and I will never be Mark Zuckerberg.
No.
It's just not how our brains work.
That's exactly right.
That's good and fine. And and I should say too, like, we drag the big guys through the mud, and we should all the time. Yeah. But I want also to remind people, because one of the things we don't teach in the United States is financial literacy.
Correct. Yep.
And so understanding that, first of all, $1 million does not make you rich anymore. Nope. It just doesn't, with the way the economy is.
That's right.
Makes you it might make you wealthy, and it might put you in the upper 5%, but it just doesn't, the way the world works.
That's right.
There is a lot of people in this country, I have met many of them, that have a significant amount of assets that are good people. Yes.
Agree.
I've met people who have no assets who are jerk faces.
Yes.
So it is just like you said, there's no moral assignment to the wealth that you have. A lot of it's privilege, luck.
Right.
Your particular personality, you inherited wealth, you were at the right place at the right time. Like, all of those kind of things, it's messy, but it's not moral necessarily until you cross over into the billionaires, where for a lot of them, for the oil barons, the new oil barons, as it were, that is moral. They have that money because they do not care about morality.
That's right.
So, I mean, you have some other, like, Taylor Swift's a billionaire because, like, she's giving a good product and appears to care about people from all reports that we've been given. So she might be the first, like, semi-ethical billionaire, which is a bizarre conversation that we're going to have to deal with as a people. Because up to this point, we've said that all billionaires are unethical. And I'm not sure we can make that claim about her.
Right. I think that that's the thing, right? I think that that's providing a lot of cover for, like, that. Well, what about Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift's a good, you know what I mean? Like, do you think Taylor Swift shouldn't be a billionaire? And I'm always like, yeah. I think there should be
why is she still selling her music? Like, she's fine.
Yeah,
like,
no,
there's some
limits.
there's some way, like, should she pay 14 times more tax than I do? Yes.
Like,
so, all
love
of these,
you, Taylor, but
no, you're fine, girl. Like,
you're gonna be fine.
You're fine. Like, please just have enough to pay for your security.
Yes.
Make yourself happy.
Yes.
Pay everyone exorbitantly that works for you, which I love. That's a value, because it's a value of mine as well.
Agree.
Like, and then let me introduce you to World Central Kitchen, and we'll see you later. So, but we all have different values. As depressing as this sounds, we've been here before.
Yeah.
And not to sound too much like an unemotional economist, but we are rapidly approaching a place where the market will self-correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, it does it every once in a while. It kind of has to reset. Yeah. I mean, I saw a picture last night of an 8-piece chicken dinner at the Buffalo Sabres game was $53.
Holy cow.
That's not, it's chicken fingers meal at Six Flags right now is $27. Y'all, these things are going to course correct. Like, they just can't keep doing this. The market will not sustain it. So things that you love are going to close. Products you trust are going to go away. Do I think we're getting to the Great Depression? No, because banks can no longer go bankrupt like that.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
But will it, are we living in shanty towns?
No. Yeah.
No, but it should make us remember a lot of people who currently do.
Who do. Yeah.
And perhaps be more generous with some of our resources.
Mm.
But I think the news wants us to pearl clutch and panic.
Right. But not about what's going on.
But not about what's going on, about other
rising
things.
Crime. they want us to care about people who are stealing. They want us to be upset about that. And I'm always so like, okay. That's an interesting way to frame this debate, isn't it? Yeah.
Whenever we want people to be scared of anything, the easiest way is to blame rising crime. I have loved Philadelphia since pretty much the moment I moved here. Please hear everything I'm about to say with a deep sense of affection. It is often a crap show. Yeah. We have ineffective city government. I lived in Northern Ireland, which was, at the time I first moved there, coming out of a 30-year ethnically driven armed conflict, and it has its crap together more than Philly often does. And there has been, in the last 2 years, especially since COVID, there's been a massive rise in gun violence, like 800% over 2019 or something nuts.
Yes.
There's been rise in petty crime, for sure. There's been a rise in homelessness. But instead of anyone in city positions of power asking questions as to why any of those things are,
right,
we're just accepting that like Starbucks and Target and Wawa are closing up shop and moving out of there because of rising crime.
Right.
Oh no, it's so terrible. We're losing another Starbucks because of all those petty criminals.
Right.
Okay. Or could we ask really quickly why there's not a homelessness shelter zoned within this huge block of city center?
Right.
Could we discuss why we're pouring bleach over leftover food every day at restaurants?
Right.
Because we're not legally allowed to repurpose them.
Right.
I understand there's like health concerns, but could we dream a little bit differently?
Yes.
And there's a lot of answers right now in the world that is, we've never done it this way. It can't happen that way. This is what it does. And all the news about what we're scared about is supposed to keep us in those places. This is the way the world works. It's the way the world will always work. There is no option. My only option is to burrow in my little home, be individualistic, protect my family, protect me, and that's it. It's to shove us, all of these stories are to shove us into ourselves even more.
Right.
And so what I would deeply invite everybody to do is imagine a different world.
Right. Yes.
Imagine a different way of doing it. And especially for those of you who are listening who are neurodivergent, your imaginations are different than anything we've ever had in power. Please share it with us. We all need as many voices as possible to figure out that, like, here is the list of things that are not able to change. But within those or outside of those, are there things that are? I'm not Pollyanna. I don't believe we can solve everything overnight, but I do believe that there are creative solutions that we're ignoring because we're being shoved into individualistic panic boxes.
Right. Right. And to even tie a bow on that, I would say that that's what's creating more and more cycles of burnout for all of us, because the further we get driven into ourselves, the more we have to handle on our own, the more our communities suffer, and the more that we experience those cycles of burnout, which again, get us to buy more things, and it's just all one cycle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me again, how do people buy your book?
You go on to Amazon.com. Speaking of the big guys, because sometimes you just have to deal with the world as it is. But if you search the Culture of Burnout and my name, Kristen Donnelly, it'll come up. There's also a website, cultureofburnout.com,
awesome.
And it'll lead you there as well.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay. Dr. Kristen, I would love to talk to you forever, but I know that I have to let you get back to your hard work in the world. I am so proud of you. Well done, fellow millennial. I am so excited for you. Is there anything else we can do to support you other than buy your book?
No, I mean, please. Not only because it would support me, but because we genuinely believe it would be helpful. Like, we genuinely believe that it is good. We did a lot of research. Erin and I always joke, there are more citations in this book than in either of our doctorates. So we did as much research as we possibly could to build the argument that this is going to be helpful. But the best way that you can support me and yourselves and everybody is to take a deep breath and remember that you are already enough.
Yes. Yes.
You are already enough.
I don't know about y'all, but I needed to hear that today. All right. So y'all, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the Indomitable podcast for more incredible stories of humaning. Remember that my new book is also out, Indomitable, a foster care story, and it is available wherever you get your books. Thank you to all my Indomitable friends who bought books after I shared my story for the season 1 finale. It was so rewarding to see people being impacted and sharing their journeys with me, and hopefully you are sharing them with each other. If you have any upcoming events you'd like me to bring the Indomitable experience to, please reach out via my website. And finally, as ever, I am so happy to have you in community with me. And remember, together, we are truly indomitable. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.